We can all benefit from bettering our mental health.
Awesome. So welcome to Sound Mind. I'm so excited for this segment because we get to spend time focusing on the vital importance of mental health. I grew up with a mom who is a therapist, so mental health was very important in our household. Hey, Mom, I know you're watching. I love you. But I'm even more excited because we get to learn about it from one of my favorite TikTokers who happens to be a licensed therapist as well. Please help me in welcoming Lindsay Fleming. Hi, Lindsay.
Hi, Dom. I'm so
How are
excited to
you?
be here.
Excited to have
And
you.
I love that your mom is a therapist.
Yes, the therapist bond. Feel free to introduce yourself to everybody.
Yeah, so like Dom said, I'm a licensed therapist. I started on TikTok during the pandemic, and one of my TikToks just blew up, and I started to really try to use that for positive change. And I started creating mental health content. And I own my own private practice, so I see a lot of college age students. So please put in the chat any questions you have for me. This can be the most helpful for you if I know what you need. So go ahead and make sure you're filling in that chat with questions.
Awesome. And then we also have the wonderful Jorge Alvarez here with us as well. Hello, Jorge.
Yes, hello. How is everyone doing? I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, doing well. Excited to have you. Please feel free to introduce yourself as well.
Absolutely. So, hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here because when I was an undergrad, I wish I had someone who looked like me talking to me about a subject like mental health, since growing up, it was something that wasn't really discussed. So, I'm a first generation college grad from Rutgers University. And I, while in undergrad, struggled a lot in my first year. What I thought was overwhelm, what I thought was stress, ended up being depression, anxiety. But luckily, I was able to find help. And since identifying ways to get help, I was able to realize that this was a conversation that we needed to have at an earlier point, and I needed to have at an earlier point. And so I started advocating for mental health on my campus, took that to TikTok in April of 2021. And since then, like sharing my voice on a platform like TikTok has led to me speaking at the White House, speaking in LA next month, and also having the opportunity to do incredible work as an activist and social impact strategist with MTV and Active Minds, which is a really large mental health nonprofit. And so to have this space with all of you is a privilege, and I'm so happy to chat with Lindsay and Dom and everyone.
Yes, we are happy to have you here. And learning about mental health is so important that I think I'm going to let the experts take it away from here. So I'm actually going to go get my own notebook and take some notes. So you guys got it from here. I'm excited to listen.
Thanks, Dom. Yeah, so today Jorge and I are going to talk about what mental health is, how to foster positive mental health throughout college, and what you can do if you start to feel like your mental health is struggling. So jumping right into that first topic, if you guys want to put in the chat just what comes to mind when you hear the word mental health as we start to break down what that means to us. I can start with, I think oftentimes people think of mental health as either someone has a mental health condition or they don't. But the truth is we all have mental health and we can all benefit from bettering our mental health. And really what it is it's our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It impacts the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we act, which results in how we tend to handle stress and relate to others and make choices. Do you have anything to add to that mental health definition, or how would you define mental health?
Oh, of course I do. So for me, I just need to emphasize that mental health is health, right? Mental health is far more than just its own isolated thing. And I think that that's oftentimes a mistake that I made and a lot of folks make. So when I started undergrad, again, not really having understood emotional well-being or mental health, I didn't really pay attention to what I was feeling internally. I was just focused on the physical feelings. And so for me, it's important to make sure that when I talk about mental health, I expand your definition of what mental health is as your diet, as the amount of sleep you get, as your friendships and how much time you spend with friends. And it's an accumulation of all those different factors that ultimately impact how you feel. And so I just wanted to make sure that I also touched on all those different aspects that ultimately contribute to what our mental health is.
Yes. And I'm just going to jump on that and share what I often hear from my clients as those physical symptoms that they say, oh, it's fine, it'll go away in a while, right? So headaches, stomach aches, muscle tension, heart racing, feeling restless, feeling drained, not wanting hanging out with our friends and maybe not wanting to be there, or feeling good while we're there. Then we get home and we're tired and not feeling good. So there's a lot of physical symptoms that can stem from our mental health. And that's usually what my clients first come in complaining about, is those physical symptoms. And they've usually been experiencing them for a very long time. And we talk a lot about stigma and how that's a barrier and lack of understanding of what mental health is. And I know you've spoken a lot about stigma. So I'd love for you to share just how did you get to the point where you came to an understanding that what was going on with you was mental health related?
Definitely. So like I said earlier, I'm Puerto Rican and Cuban to be particular, so I'm Latino, and talking about mental health in my household was virtually non-existent. So that definition of mental health, I had to grow and create myself and understand myself. And when it came to identifying what feelings were stemming from something deeper than just stress because of an exam, that really did take some time. But I think what really helped was recognizing that there's always more that we can dig into within ourselves, and there's always resources that we can utilize to further understand those feelings. So I did see that one of you asked the question, can you get therapy at your university? And absolutely, that's how I was able to identify that I was experiencing anxiety and depression and put a label to those feelings. I found my campus counseling center. I went to them and I said, hey, I would love to schedule a session. Took some time, I will be honest, but once I got that session, which by the way didn't require I show insurance, my parents didn't need to know, which is the fantastic part about therapy in college, I was able to start and recognize, like you said, Lindsay, that all these feelings of just feeling tired all day was not just, oh, because I didn't sleep. It was also because I was mentally drained and I was anxious, and that was taking energy out of me. So I hope that helps some of you recognize, again, what feelings might be attached and what experiences might be attached to your mental health, and definitely look into your campus counseling center as a resource.
Yes. And I want to point out too that, again, I think we have this idea of we have to be struggling to a certain point to reach out for help, and any time is a good time to start working on your mental health. And going off the Dom's story of not getting enough sleep and not thinking she did really well in an exam and turns out that she didn't, I can share a personal experience of when I was in graduate school. I had procrastinated a paper and ended up having to pull an all-nighter to finish the paper. And my boyfriend at the time, being so nice, brought me dinner, and there were mushrooms on top of my chicken fried rice that he brought me, and I hate mushrooms. And I started crying. He was like, why are you crying over mushrooms? And I was like, because you know I hate mushrooms and you brought this here. Now I can't eat my dinner. Now, do I normally cry over mushrooms? Absolutely not. But I was stressed. I had all this stuff going on. If I had good coping skills, if I had self-awareness, I probably would have been like, you know what, Danny, today I just need to cry over mushrooms. But instead, I ignored him all night. And so I just added to my stress because now I'm in a fight with my boyfriend. So over mushrooms. So I think really identifying that those spaces in colleges, they're not just for when you're in that crisis point. They're for any time that you just feel like you can gain some skills as well.
Definitely, I agree. There's also a really great question, Lindsay, if it's not too early to bring up, on the topic of building coping skills. And as I mentioned, I found help through my campus counseling center. How do you find a therapist that's right for you?
Oh, that's such a good question. My usual go-to is because I like to say, and I think you spoke to this too before when we were talking about just going off about mental health for such a long time. It is kind of, I think you said it best, like speed dating. I think I use it as the sense of like dating apps where it's like you might get some people get lucky on the first time, and some people you got to kiss a lot of frogs before you find the prince. So I really like to
That's a new one.
I really like to utilize referrals. So if you know someone who has a really good therapist that they feel like is helpful, ask them if they know of someone who they refer to. I think that is the best way, but I know that also sometimes we don't feel comfortable doing that, and that's okay, or we don't know someone who is receiving services. So in that case, I would definitely say, like, you can schedule an intake session and we're here for you. I know I'm not everybody's jam. I have a lot of energy. Some people are like, you're too much, and that's okay. I'm not made for everyone. So really you utilize that intake session to figure out, is this a good fit for me? Ask them, what does therapy look like with you? Are you someone who wants really concrete skills? Do you want more processing and listening? So ask yourself, what do I want out of this? And then see if that therapist, you feel safe, you feel connected, and is giving you that.
Absolutely. And I can second that. I also use the metaphor sometimes that finding a therapist is like finding that right pair of jeans. Because, I mean, we all know the struggle of finding that right pair of jeans. But I'll tell you that I had the opportunity to see two therapists while I was in undergrad, and both of them helped me in a lot of different ways. So that's definitely a topic I can always get into. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay, so moving on to fostering positive mental health throughout college, I think we've started to stem on some of that. But I just wanted to note that while we were talking about this, you guys, we were just talking about a lot about mental health and what it is. Now we're going to get into some ways that you can foster that positive mental health. Feel free to put in the chat things that you do that make you feel good. What are you already doing that helps your mental health? I work with a lot of college students, and I noticed that they have packing lists. They spend hours looking for that perfect roommate. They are picking out their clothes. They're buying material, but I never hear them have a checklist of, how do I make myself emotionally ready to this change? What's going to be different for me? And how can I be ready to cope with that? And I wanted to let people know that nearly 1/3 of students who drop out of college said that mental health issues were contributing factor. And that's from Sally May's How America Completes College study. So I would just really encourage people to think about the changes in, you're not around your support system sometimes, your schedule looks different, there's a lot less oversight and a lot more ability to go out and do maybe some things that aren't so good for our mental health all the time. We need balance, right? So do you have anything to add for that? Like maybe some people's checklists or what you wish you would have thought about before starting your college experience?
Definitely. So there were some things mentioned earlier. I think first and foremost, it's identifying community, right? What does community look like for you? That's the most powerful thing for me. So what are extracurriculars you can get involved in, clubs you can explore? Who can you start to turn to have that honest conversation? I think now the conversation around mental health is growing more and more normalized. And of course, there's work to be done. And we're part of that work in the sense that we can all check in with a friend and ask each other how we're doing. And that is incredibly powerful. I'm sure everyone can relate to that. So start to identify, who can you turn to? Who are those high school friends you can call? And what helped me was also identifying academic resources on campus. And again, where my CAPS center was on campus, and remembering that it was okay to go at any point. I didn't need to be in crisis, which is oftentimes an idea a lot of us have. I can just be stressed about an exam and go to that counseling center, and it's really not that hard to find. I saw someone ask also like how to start that discussion. I would say honestly, just ask someone, hey, like, where can I get help for my mental health? Asking that straightforward, people and employees at your university will definitely help you out and point you towards the right direction.
Yes, definitely. I love that you said community building. I often have, when we are in a good place, that's the best time to make a plan for when we're struggling, because when we're struggling, it's hard to function, let alone ask people, be like, what can I do to help myself? So definitely creating a plan. Who is your support system? Things like that. And that leads right into what to do when our mental health starts to struggle. So if you guys want to add in that some ways that you kind of know, oops, I need to pay attention to my mental health a little bit. And what I will say is, what I make my clients do is, I'm all about prevention work. How can we keep our mental health going, feeling good? And so what I have my clients do is, in their phone notes, because everybody always has their phone on them, I have them do prevention work. What are they doing that's making them stay in that positive mental health space? Taking walks, making sure that they're going to class, making sure they're going to the library once a week, whatever that is. The next thing is, what are their warning signs that maybe my mental health is struggling a little bit, and what they can do about it. And then the third one is, okay, when I feel like I'm stuck, who can I go to for support and how? Because having a list of people is really great, but I find that people are like, well, I don't know what to say, or well, I don't want to burden them. And so really having the language ready for yourself. I know we've talked about making sure you go to these places when you are in your first day on college campus and just getting familiar with them. Do you have anything to add maybe that people can put in this list?
Definitely. For me, one thing I neglected and is a must, schedule you time. Schedule you time on your same Google Calendar that we've all mentioned to, manage your courses and deadlines for the FAFSA. I hope I said that right. Also, schedule you time. Schedule time to just have fun. Your Friday night, schedule that time for you and no one else. And if that's time with friends, fantastic. But just make sure that you proactively do that, because that's equally as important to filling your cup before you could pour into any other cups like school, extracurriculars, etc. Also, again, for me, it was really making sure that I was building those tools. So when I started undergrad, meditation was super novel to me. And I had these pictures in my head of what meditation looked like. But I've been meditating since my first year of undergrad, and identifying other coping mechanisms has been so helpful. So those two things I'd really want to point out.
Yeah, and that's someone asked in the chat, like, how can students best prioritize mental health if they have no extra time, in their day? And I think, that's a bigger question to ask yourself. How many classes are like, what is your schedule look like?
Yeah.
But I will say taking small moments, like in the morning, doing a 5-minute meditation or gratitude, taking deep breaths while you're walking to class. What type of music are you listening to? Is it bringing you upbeat? What are we doing while we do have that free time? Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, for me in undergrad, I found myself always being that student who had no time, because I was that person who threw myself in 20 different extracurriculars, and was also balancing my pre-med courses in addition to public health courses. So I resonate with this experience. And for me, again, what helped were those grounding things that I stuck to. It doesn't need to be every day, right? I think a lot of times we feel pressure that we need to have the same morning routine every day. But squeezing in, your favorite, like meditation while you're on the bus to another class, or making sure that you're eating food that energizes you, things like that were really, really important for me that I underestimated. So those are things that I would do, and you'll realize that if you can nurture yourself and try to have more of a clear mind, you can also continue to make more space for yourself. And that for me really helped me do better in my classes. So if you don't have any time like I did, I would say try your best to make time for yourself and for your mental health, because that'll only return in a compound interest by the time you graduate. Definitely.
That's really good. And I think we've been taught at a young age, right? We get rewarded for doing extracurricular activities and being a straight A student more than we get rewarded for balance and prioritizing our mental health. We tell adults, don't bring work home with you, but yet we give kids homework starting really young. So I think learning this balance at a young age can be really helpful, in recognizing that your accomplishments do not equal your worth. I know that
Say that louder.
was really, really stressed and doing a million things, but then someone would be like, how do you do it all? And I'm like, yep, how do I do it all? Well, I'm not. I'm crying over mushrooms, right? So I think it's, again, that idea of asking yourself, what do I need? And how can I get that? Someone else asked, what should you do if you're having trouble finding your community at the college you end up at? And I know this is something a lot of my clients struggle with. Yeah, you too? Then why don't you start us off? Take
I feel
it away.
that so hard. Yeah, so when I started undergrad, I really struggled to find my community because, again, I mentioned that I experienced depression early on, so that prevented me from doing any outreach and going to any clubs. But once I started to get the help that I needed, for me, it was really identifying like what those smaller interests were, and it was trying to find ways to show up and take the pressure and expectation off myself that I needed to leave that with a friend, or I needed to leave that as part of this club. But just showing up, that in and of itself, signing up for a newsletter even, is a really small step that I took to eventually find a club that I really resonated with. And from a cultural standpoint, I really struggled also to fit in undergrad and to feel like I belonged. And that also played into my mental health, which is why I value community so much. But there's cultural centers on campus that are so incredibly awesome. They run events all the time. There's also clubs that host out of there. There's socials, and there tends to be a lot of free food at those events, just an FYI. So those are another great opportunity if you're feeling that way, to just show up again and be in that space. And someone will come up to you. Maybe you can challenge yourself to talk to just one person. But that's what comes to mind for me, because I was there my entire first year, and it wasn't until my second year that I found a club and I finally found community midway through my second year. So I understand.
So that's also for people on here, stick it out and keep trying and pushing yourself, and you will get there. I think it is really hard when we struggle in the beginning of the year, because especially your freshman year, that is when people, it's like kindergarten, right? You're making friends all over again, and everyone's like, oh, do you want to go to lunch here? Do you want to go to dinner? So that's a good place to set yourself up by pushing yourself in those moments. However, if that is just not your jam or that's too hard, that's okay. And I really encourage you, there's like usually peer mentorships, cultural centers, like the counseling centers. There's a lot of systems in place to try to help students specifically with that. So it's really about reaching out to those resources and asking your school, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. How can you help me? Just like we would if we were struggling in biology, we would get a tutor and be like, hey, can you help me get more prepared for my courses, feel more confident about this? We can do that with social skills as well. Okay. Definitely. I think that's all we have time for. Any last thoughts that you want to share?
No, really. I just want to remind you that I know sometimes there's pressure that college is going to be the top of your life. And I know that it's important to remember that challenges are okay. It's okay to not be okay. I know it might sound cliche, but truly remember that, and remember that you're not alone, and that you're going to find ways to find that community, to have fun, to learn, to grow. And you're going to thrive at the end of the day, and you're going to walk across that stage with a degree in your hand, and you're going to be like, wow, I did that, and I prioritized myself, or I tried my best to. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And always feel free to reach out to me on socials as well. It's and then my first and last name, as you see here. How about you, Lindsay?
Yeah, I mean, now you just sparked a thought that I had, which was, I remember that I was reading research that they did, that they asked college students while they were in college, their stress levels and their anxiety levels. And then they asked them again, like 20 years later. You know, everybody always says college are the best years of your life. And then you get there and you're like, oh, I better make this count. These are the best years of my life. My life's over after this.
Yeah, exactly.
It was, the answers were so different. Same person. But they reported feeling way more stressed and anxious while they were in college. Then when 10, 20 years later, when they're looking back at college, they're saying, oh, I wasn't stressed. Oh, I wasn't anxious. Those were the best years of my life. So we tend to look back at it with rose-colored glasses a lot of times too. So I love that you had said that. I think that's great. And I just want to invite Dom back in here.
Hey guys. You guys had so many great tips. So many. I was literally writing so many things down. But I want to ask too, because you just brought up stress level. Adi asked in the chat, how many colleges should you actually apply to? So I'm curious, with applying, I know it can be really stressful as a high school student, especially when you don't know how many to apply to and you don't know which ones you're going to get accepted to. So I want to throw that question in you guys' ballpark. If you can answer first how many you think you should apply to and what your application process look like, but then on top of it, how to deal with the stress of those applications.
Definitely. I can jump in on this one. So for me, I was really grateful to learn that there are waivers to help with the application fee, which I needed because I'm, again, first gen, come from a lower income household. So definitely look into those if you haven't already. And once I did, that honestly took a lot of stress away from applying, because that was one of the biggest things that was on my mind when I was starting that process. And once I had those waivers, I honestly, for me, aimed to do, I didn't really have a number in mind, but I just aimed to do a good amount both in-state and out-of-state so that I had options when it came to tuition and financial aid packages to review, what was the best, both based off of program and then also based off of finances at the time.
Yeah. I'm going to give a really annoying answer. It varies, which is the worst thing you want to hear, right? But what I would like to say as far as boundaries around it is, I usually say we want to do one school that we kind of know we meet the criteria for. We want to do one school where we're for sure I can get into this school. One school where we're okay, I think I'm pretty good here. And one school that's a reach school. So I like to give those options, because we don't want to just go all reach schools and then we're I'm so stressed, what if I don't get in? So making sure that we're balanced. And I love what you said, making sure we're also balanced with in-state versus out-of-state, and being thoughtful about, do you want small, big? Start to ask yourselves, what do you want out of your school?
Yeah. And I could add to that and say that one thing that doesn't really get spoke about too much is that with all your applications, you have to pay. Well, not all, but a lot of them, you do have to pay an application fee.
Yeah.
So I think that ends up kind of limiting how many you can apply to, because you might not be able to afford all that you want to. I applied to a lot. I applied to 13 schools, but I think everybody's different. Like Lindsay said, it's just, it depends. It varies. So I don't think you should look at somebody else and be like, oh, well, they did that, so I should do that. Because that's not how it works. So I like all the stuff you guys mentioned is perfect to answer Adi's questions. So thank you for taking the time for that. And thank you guys for joining me today and sharing all of your insights in the Sound Mind segment of this talk.
Thank you, Dom.
Thank you.
Of course. Well, I hope I see you guys soon. Awesome. So we're going to recap yet again. So, hey, Sally, let's see what you have written down for a recap. So what we learned about maintaining a good mental health. Always, it's better for handling stress, relationships, and decision-making. Next is to seek a community and build a support system early on if possible. Community is so important in college. It can feel really lonely sometimes. So I really agree with that one. And then identify and proactively use the mental health resources at your college. You are paying a lot of money to be at these campuses, like we mentioned in the first segment. So you might as well use the resources. And it's just going to make you a better person and a better student, which is what your job is in college, is to be a student. It's to go to class. So if anything's holding you back from that, you should use your resources to figure out how you can overcome that hump. And like Troy mentioned at the very beginning, looking for solutions. And mental health is definitely a solution to a lot of stress, keeping your mental health in check.